So we've been given the first but the shortest bit to start with. And, you know, I often think it's better to give you the bad news first, simply because then we can end on a note of hope by the end. And I like the fact that most of you are somewhere in the middle. We're talking about the state of the globe right now. I'm going to do a little bit of a tour of what we have gotten used to in 2025, and Pita's going to take over with his prognosis for 2026. So straight away, I would say the year 2025 was a year of sobering reflections. The idea that we are all getting used to a world that we know a little less, and the world that we had come to expect is existing less and less. So the best way to see what we have given up is to look at it in terms of 5 absences, or the dilution of these ideas. The first is the absence of a body of global order. The United Nations no longer seems to suggest that it can fix the world's problems, or it can even be involved in a lot of the world's problems. There are places where the UN is simply not allowed to operate anymore, and global confidence in the United Nations is at its lowest. The second is the absence of soft power. We're getting used to the idea of a transactional world, the world that is going to work on dollars, cents, hard power. But the idea of soft power, it can't be better said than what we've seen in the US, where all the underpinnings of what Joseph Nye would have spoken of in soft power, in terms of trade, in terms of aid, in terms of students in universities, in terms of immigration, and in terms of what the US gave to the world in terms of an alliance of democracies, that's going to go away, or looks like it is, certainly. The third is the absence of rules. The global leader is no longer playing by the rules. So those who set the rules are no longer playing by them, whether it's the US on trade, whether it is Russia, China, the P5, on various different issues where they either have double standards or they're simply willfully disobeying the rules they themselves help set up. The absence of work. Where I come from, Asia, where most of the world's population lives and most of the world's young population lives, we're beginning to see 2 different phenomenon coming together and somehow making the future seem bleaker. One phenomenon is anti-immigration sentiments worldwide. The idea that people no longer want outsiders inside and aren't as open about the liberal world order welcoming them. The second is AI, and the idea that somehow the jobs that are going to go away will affect this population, because we have to think about where that population is going to go, where it's going to get its remittances from, and what it's going to do instead. When you start to see people coming out on the streets and they're all young people, you have to start wondering. In my region of South Asia, we've already seen unconstitutional changes in government, or irregular changes in government in 6 neighbors. Whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's Nepal, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's Afghanistan. And the 5th is, unfortunately, we're beginning to look at an absence of democracy. And the absence of democracy is not so much about countries that are not democratic. It's about the absence of democratic values. Democracy is going into transition towards more authoritarian states. And, depending on where you're from, you can probably see one of these symptoms there, whether it is about the attacks on the NGOs, on journalists, on the opposition, whether it is about personal freedoms, or whether it is about disinformation and the actual tampering of elections. So we're seeing a sort of a feeling inside the world that somehow we're giving up something we used to hold on to, we used to think was ours. Peter, I'm going to turn to you. 2026 looks better.
So this is even harder than last night. I mean, last night was State of Asia, now it's the State of the World. And I'm doing it right after Suhasini. I think this is the way I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to talk about 2026 historic first, something that is happening for the first time in 2026. Something that you might not know about me is currently now I'm also a journalist. I'm a columnist as well. And I started my career in management consulting. So I'm going to do, rather than qualitative only, trying to complement it with some quantitative numbers. First number, historic high. I'm going to do something about climate change just to honor Swiss Re. I quoted Swiss Re a couple of times in Thai Parliament from their climate economic index. The vulnerability from climate change, number 1, Indonesia, number 2, India, number 3, Philippines, number 4, Venezuela, and number 5, Thailand. So I use that number a lot, so I'm going to talk about the historic high of when it comes to environment. So 2026 will be the first year in the world history where electricity will be created by renewables. Renewables is passing coal for the first time in the history, 34% according to IEA in Paris. So coal will be about 33%, renewables, hydro, solar, bio, and all those things could be 34% next year. Gas is about 22 something, nuclear is about 9. So that's something that is telling you about the state of the world in terms of the environment. However, next year will be the year with a very high probability that the global temperature will rise above 1.5% according to Paris Agreement also. So just because the electricity, which is a portion of global output, we're getting some good news from it, but the climate change situation is not really improving. 66% of it being exceeding 1.5% in terms of temperature in 2026. That's historic first, number 1 for environment. Number 2 is about economy. So next year will be the first year ever that the emerging economies is surpassing G7. G7 is, okay, UK, France, Italy, Germany, America, Canada, Asia is Japan, yeah? So that's the G7. Back in 2020, it's about 54% of the global economy. This year, it will be only 45. So that means the rest of the world that is not on the G7 list will surpass the G7. And it will be the year that India surpasses Japan. So it will be America, China, Germany, India, and then Japan. Another interesting point is that the non-state actors, the big tech companies, the Magnificent Seven, if you combine their market cap, will be global number 3. Behind America, China, and the big 7, the Mac 7, and then India, and then Japan. I think those numbers are pretty remarkable when it comes to, historic first. The last one that I'm working on, because I'm writing this column for the new year in 2026, so I'm verifying whether it's true or not. The global birth rate will be the lowest in the world history, 15 babies per 1,000 people. It was 16 last year. Next year in 2026, it will be 15 babies with every 1,000 people. In Thailand, the birth rate will be 8 out of 1,000. The death will be 8 out of 1,000. So that means people are dying more than being born. And in Switzerland, it's 9 to 9. So 9 babies per year and 9 deaths per year out of one total of 1,000 people. So those are the 2026 historic first that, with that 3 numbers, is telling us a little bit about the state of the world at the moment.
Oh, interesting. The first thing you said over there about climate change, we all feel it. We all feel it like we haven't before, especially when you come to Europe, for example. And yet, it's like the conversations have fallen off the map. People are still doing what they were doing in terms of going for renewables, in terms of, but the conversation, the SDGs, the COP30, the climate change goals, those have kind of gone off the map. Have people stopped planning? Are people now looking again at fossil fuels? I saw a study that said fossil fuels are around till 2050 will still dominate the market.
Yeah, so next year will be 33 plus 22, so about 55.
Yeah.
But renewables is surpassing coal, and gas is about 20% for the first time. But I feel like, yeah, I hear your point totally, in the sense that, the ability for you to verify the carbon transmission, especially in Asia, is very hard to do. So credibility and transparency that you might have here in Switzerland and in Europe is something that is not the same when it's happening to Asia. So when the government is telling you that we're containing carbon release and things like that, people just don't trust it anymore, and it becomes a lip service. It becomes what they call greenwashing. It is just to something that make companies look good, but it's not really the case. That's the problem.
We've got into half our session without actually saying the word Trump.
G2.
And G2. Do you think the world is moving to personalities? Because what we see in India, and certainly in India as well, is policy has taken a back seat to these personalities. And even though we're waking up in the morning and the personalities are making news, by the end of the day, they're making news for something completely different. So if in the morning, Mr. Trump makes news by saying, I'm going back to nuclear testing, by the evening, he's making news for something else. So we're not really sure if the policy has changed or if the leaders are just throwing things out with the idea that something will stick. In which case, how do you actually plan for the future? In journalist terms, we used to call ourselves post-truth analysts. Yeah. Now we're post-analysts, because if there isn't serious logic, or logic that we can see to a decision made by leaders, then how do you analyze that? How do you say this is why this happened? As a leader, what do you think the world is looking at here?
So the issue that we're talking back in Boston at Harvard Kennedy School, there's a center called ASH, Democratic Innovation, which talks about how Democrats have to come up with a new playbook against autocrats all around the world. And to summarize it into a sentence, the situation that the world is going through, whether it's in Asia, in Europe, or in America, is fast autocrats, slow institutions. Institutions are designed to be slow, deliberative, cautious. But autocrats nowadays, they can, just like Suhasini was saying, get into the news cycle very quickly, executive power quickly, before the legislative or the courts or the news fact check and things like that. The autocrats already moved on to the new situation. So that's a kind of situation that Democrats all around the world have to refresh their own playbook on how to tackle these kind of things. So the reason why, when I talked about my second historic highs on the non-state actors, the Magnificent Seven, from Apple to Tesla, they have that kind of ability to move information so fast that we could not control it. And algorithm transparency, polarization through the internet is something that is out of balance. And sometimes because of all these things, once you click on TikTok on a particular issue, that it keeps coming back at you, so that it's a post-truth, it's a post-analyzed things, because you can't really stop and think about it. So, if we can't win the information narrative that is going on, them combined is $19 trillion just behind China and America. Yeah. Well, that's something that the world leaders have to think about, in order to make sure this fast autocrats, slow institutions is no longer the case anymore. But without this information war, it's very easy for competitive autocrats to be precise. Competitive autocracy is like you actually vote for the guy, the elected leader, and that's how the democracy dies, by capturing judicial, by capturing the state, by capturing the legislature, by capturing the media, and finally they use others to their incumbent advantage. they're all elected leaders nowadays. So that's...
Yeah. On a conversation, I once had a former president from Europe say to me, when I was growing up, the idea was that men would be men. He didn't mean it just men, but men and women will be just humans and open to emotions, but governments would do what was in the best interests of the country and possibly try to do what was in the best interest of the world. And the idea that that's gone away now, that leaders aren't necessarily, leaders are emotional, but governments are just following through with that. That the institutions now no longer are posing a pushback, either on speed or...
The way we framed it in Boston again is responsive government and representative government. Because of the populism and with this kind of fast information that is going on, sometimes you are a representative government. You're trying to represent the people. Okay, housing crisis, affordability, blah, blah, blah. So you become a representative government, but not a responsible government. You know, those are the things that's also emerging according to your narrative.
So the last few minutes have to be about hope, have to be about doing away with the gray zones you were speaking about last night. And there are all these ideas out there. And I would presume that for the next 20 years, at least until the UN turns 100, the conversations will be about what will replace it. And we've still got that idea that if we didn't have a United Nations, we would invent one. And the ideas are simple. One is one that's more representative. You can't have a P5 that doesn't include the world's most populous country, that doesn't include so many continents, Africa, South America, Australasia in a sense. Or you have something that is called 50-50-50. Have you heard of this rule, the 50-50? That you won't actually have one single rule-making body, but you will have 50 countries coming together, so, you know, on a certain issue, and producing the rules for the rest. So whether it's AI, whether it's robotic warfare, whether it's climate change and all the rest, where do you see the future?
Minilaterals. Quadrilateral, yeah. It will be a decentralized web of nodes, that's correct. But when you were saying it, that in the sense that, you know, it might be different alliance, but for a common cause on AI safety,
sure.
AI ethics on warfare, for example. So it will be grouped, maybe in groupings to a quadrilateral. That's also a possibility as well.
Yeah, but in groups of quadrilaterals, who else is going to follow? We're already looking at a P5 that cannot make a single decision work. For 3 years, they couldn't pass a single resolution of consequence on the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Well, that's all
on
consensus.
Israel and Gaza, you know.
That's all consensus since wartime on a new normal. So we need a new consensus for new normal.
Well, I think we need a commitment, like we did in the 1940s, a commitment to human rights, a commitment to certain values for the world. We need a new commitment to a rules-based order.
Absolutely. It's human rights redefined. I was talking to people inside of UN. They have UPR, correct? The Universal Periodic Review. They get countries to talk about their problems and how they're going to solve it. Just that if you put them to make a timeline to it and a budget allocated to all those things, just a slight twist, I think that gives them some teeth to what they are trying to do about the old rules, for example. So they have to really reform themselves and come up with new ways of doing things.
Finally, I just want to ask what would be a contentious question in this. We've now seen many examples, your country, the leader of the world, of businessmen becoming leaders of their countries.
Right.
Do you think the two mix? Do you think public service and business mix?
Some, not all. I think the goal of private sector is to maximize profit, maximize shareholders' wealth. The goal of public service is service. So there's a big distinction of how you deliver things. Because you're trying to maximize shareholders' wealth for an energy company does not mean the national security national energy security for that country.
So,
but you can, mimic the way you manage your political party with your company. You can think about succession planning. You can think about strategy, structure, process, and the people within the political party. But you cannot think of governing like a business because it's totally different goals.
So when you move to service, it's necessary to put the dollars and cents.
Yeah, it's much harder for me. I think it's
Not just you. I mean, we look around the world.
Well, I couldn't speak for other people. I'm speaking for myself. Coming from the private sector to the public sector is just intellectually more, interesting. It's very challenging in managing people and things like that. You manage your MPs; they're equal to you. There's no KPIs. You cannot fire them. So it's totally different ways of doing things.
So we need a new understanding of public-private partnerships in the world.
Exactly.
That's all we have time for on this first session. We certainly hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much.